Good morning. This is 1 in 36, a presentation from Anderson Center for Autism. 1 in 36 is a weekly show devoted to autism spectrum disorder.
Welcome to 1 in 36, the weekly talk show on topics related to autism spectrum disorder. I'm your host, Eliza Bozensky, Chief Development Officer at Anderson Center for Autism. And today I'm speaking with Gary Shulman, who is the Advisory Commissioner for the Arlington Partnership for Children, Youth, and Families. Gary, thank you for being on the show.
It is my pleasure to be here. Thank you. It's always good to be sharing and caring. We need that these days.
Yes. And I am fully ready, as I told you before we started, for positivity. I think, when you read a little bit about you and your background, but also what you're doing in Arlington today, and that seems to be a major theme in your personal life, your professional life, your background. And hopefully we're going to hear a lot more about that today. But let's start with just a little background on you. And you can start at any point. You can start from, the very beginnings or wherever you feel comfortable, and tell us a little bit about what brought you to where you are today doing what you're doing.
Well, yeah, I'm a Brooklyn boy from way, way back. I'm 74 now. Happily 74, doing what my passion is, which is still helping vulnerable families. And that's what I'm doing now in Arlington, Virginia, as an advisory commissioner. We deal with mental health issues. We deal with childhood trauma. We try to get the word out so that families can be linked with concrete resources to help make life a little bit easier. But I started my life as a Head Start teacher in Brooklyn, New York. And that was what really introduced me to children with disabilities and the value of inclusion, because the Head Start system was always a system that promoted inclusion. I had maybe 17% to 20% of my class were always children with various disabilities. That kind of told me that there's something good here. There's something good having children learn from each other, learn that diversity is something not to be feared. But diversity is something that's a reality of this world, and that's the world that all children are going to eventually be living in. So that was my beginning of my career, of learning about children with disabilities and then the needs that their families had. So that kind of led me to work at the Brooklyn Children's Museum, and knew about my work at the Head Start. They pulled me into the Brooklyn Children's Museum, where I was the special needs coordinator, working with all kinds of children with disabilities, taking artifacts to places like United Cerebral Palsy Centers, schools for children who are blind, who sometimes found it difficult to get to a museum site. So I would bring the museum to them.
That's great.
But I would also, as part of what I did, sensitize the neighborhood children in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, to the whole concept of diversity. I would teach them Braille. I would teach them sign language. And one day, a little girl came into the Brooklyn Children's Museum, and she's rapping in sign language to her mommy. And one of my little Crown Heights children, who's like 5 years of age, Lakeisha, she sees this, and she goes over to her, and she goes, "Hi, my name is," and then she starts to spell her name. And the little girl who was deaf started to rap in sign language so fast, and Lakeisha got scared. But it was such a beautiful thing to see that what I was doing, trying to inculcate the concept that different is okay. We're all different. There are different ways of communicating. There are different ways of just bringing people into your life who are different than you are. Yeah. And they walked through the museum together, and she was trying to do her finger spelling, and they became friends.
Yeah.
That best outcome possible.
I was going to say, and not to diminish what that did for the little girl who was already in the museum and was sort of rapping to her mom and maybe feeling like her mom was the only person that she could communicate with that day. But way to empower Lakeisha also to go make a friend and to feel like it must feel like a superpower when you see something and you're like, I know what that is. I can do that. That's
it works.
Fantastic.
It works. I spelled my name. She knew my name.
Yeah.
The best part of that little experience, then I'll kind of move on to my journey in life. The best part was that when I first got my job at the Brooklyn Children's Museum, I did a little survey. I looked around, I saw the images, and I said to the head of graphic arts, I said, look, you see that poster we have of all those children playing? Can you stick a hearing aid in that child's ear? And she looked at me like, why? And I said, trust me, just do something like that. And she started to do that so that even the images that we had were diverse. When that little girl who was deaf and her mommy went down to the library, they saw that poster. They had never seen a mainstream organization go out of its way to represent her child. And they kept coming back to the museum. So the power of representation, even just visual representation,
Yeah.
it's like you are accepted. So after the Brooklyn Children's Museum, then came my heavy-duty advocacy work, 24 years at Resources for Children with Special Needs, which was federally funded. It still exists, but in a different name. It's now called Include NYC.
Yes.
But I was their training director, their social services specialist. I organized the special camp fair for about 25 years. And I loved that. I loved helping the families. I have OCD myself. That's kind of my special need. And the parents knew I might send them information at 3:00 in the morning, because if I'm working with a parent and something struck me, say, oh, wait, that's a program that could help Mrs. Johnson, I will get her that information.
Yeah.
Had to tell me, Gary, it's okay. Take it easy. I'm okay for a while. You don't have to.
Yeah.
But it just makes me feel so good. That's all about kindness.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is all about kindness. To me, they say, Gary, do you believe in an afterlife? And all I know is that if there's any kind of purpose for being here, it's to leave the world a better place than you found it. So luckily, I've been in positions that have allowed me to, in some small way, leave this world a better place. And I'm still doing that here in Arlington, through my work on the Partnership for Children, Youth, and Families.
That's great. I just want to comment that we know Include New York, Include NYC, formerly Resources for Children with Special Needs, very well. We have a mutual acquaintance, Tandra Linford, who was one of the founding parents who put that organization together, and I've had the opportunity to spend some time with them in both iterations, and that organization has really proven to be so instrumental in helping an incredible number of individuals and families as they navigate these systems that have gotten, I would venture to say, more and more challenging to navigate over the decades. While services may have increased, at least to some degree, in terms of number of different services, finding those services still remains a challenge.
Yeah. And what I found is, I'm not going to concentrate too much on this, but there's a tremendous inequity in all states when it comes to services for children with developmental disabilities, such as autism, versus those families that I work with who have children who have not intellectual, but rather psychiatric conditions, emotional disabilities, who may be cognitively unlevel and they just have emotional psychiatric. Like every county has a family support guide for parents with development, and it's like, that thick. There is no such thing for parents of children with emotional disabilities.
Yeah.
So there are inequities that do exist across the board, depending on the disability, and that a lot of that has to do with politics.
Yeah.
Parents who've gotten together and become political forces. Parents of children with autism and developmental disabilities have become a political force, and amen to that. That's what we got to do.
Yeah.
Moving forward these next few years, we may see threats to programs, budgetary threats, fiscal threats, cutting that. So I think now more than ever, it's important to have a voice.
I would underscore that as well, that we find families are by far the best advocates for their loved ones, whether it's on a local level all the way up to a federal level. And I would agree with you. The autism is a great example of that. It's become a very much well-known topic. It's gotten a lot of sort of light shined on it. There's more to do, but you're right. There's inequities. There's no standards. We could go down that road.
Yeah, it's a whole other word. Yeah, that's a whole other interview. So tell us. We have about 3 minutes left in the first half of this interview. Okay.
Tell us about the specifically, what is the Arlington Partnership for Children, Youth, and Families? What is your mission? What are you out to do?
Yeah, I mean, it is a county program. We come together on a regular basis, people who have various backgrounds, some in education, some from the library, some from recreation, some from mental health. And Arlington is a very diverse community. It's not a city, it's a county. It's the smallest county in the whole country. It's not a city, which I didn't even realize. People kept correcting me. We have a lot of immigrant families who right now are stressed out, and they have to be stressed out. We do have a number of parents of children with disabilities. We have all types of human beings here who need mental health intervention. So the partnership really tries to get the word out about mental health services. We hold meetings throughout the county. We try to provide concrete information and linkage to families who need stress relief, who need intervention, who need support groups, therapies. And we're just trying to get that out in every way possible. We usually have a huge conference once a year where we try to bring families together with vendors who provide these services, talking about insurance, and how to get affordable insurance so they can pay for these services, linking them with free services as well. So I wanted to be on this because I wanted to kind of be the voice for parents of children with disabilities. They didn't really have that. It really should be a parent of a child with a disability, or maybe a young person with a disability. And one of my goals this year is to try to pull in parents of children and teens and young adults with disabilities to become active members of the partnership. So that's what we do. And it's very satisfying to me to continue working with vulnerable families. And as well as helping the Arlington families, I still have a tremendous love for my New York City families. So what I did was I regenerated all of my workshops. I used to do workshops, and I love that more than anything. And I'm doing it virtually now to all my New York City folks. And just about all of the people I used to work with before I moved from New York in 2019, I've kind of regenerated that energy. Places like AHRC and YAI and Center for Support and a lot of the parent groups. And I'm working a lot with foster parents who have chosen to take into their lives children with disabilities. I mean, to me, they are heroes. They've gone out of their way to say, I will take care of this child that nobody else wants to take care of, or possibly who has been abused because mommy didn't know what to do with this child. So I will take this child. So I'm working a lot virtually with those families, and that's bringing me just tremendous joy and satisfaction doing that again.
That's great. I love how this is circling back to things that are also feeding you and your soul. It's really, it's the most successful model you can come up with. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, I have several follow-up questions for you, Gary. Good. So we're going to take a real short break and we'll come back. This is 1 in 36, the weekly talk show on topics related to autism spectrum disorder. I'm your host, Eliza Bozensky, and we'll be right back.
Okay, forest animals, today is a new day. Kids are coming to the forest, and it's up to us to make their visit a good one. Sparrow.
Yes?
Have you practiced the most popular bird songs for the year?
Of course.
Catchy. I like it. Okay, River.
Dude.
How's the temperature?
It's a refreshing 52 degrees, man. Perfect for a little riverside shoeless relaxation.
Ah, good. Owl, you here? Course. Who's asking? I am. Look, you know the drill. Sleep during the day, scare the kids at night. Perfect. I love my job. Oak Tree?
What's up?
Still in the same place I left you last year. That's what I like. Consistency.
Well, it's not like I'm going anywhere for the next couple hundred years.
I know. I love it. Turtle.
He's not here yet, man.
He's late every morning. You'd think he would have learned by now to leave the night before our meetings. Okay. Squirrel. Has anybody seen Mr. Squirrel?
The forest has been preparing just for you. Visit a forest near you today. To learn more about cool things to do in the forest, visit discovertheforest.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service and the Ad Council.
If I could be you.
And you could be me.
For just 1 hour.
If you could find a way.
To get inside.
Each other's mind.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
We've all felt left out. And for some, that feeling lasts more than a moment. We can change that. Learn how at belongingbeginswithus.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
And now, 1 in 36 continues on 100.7 WHUD. This is a weekly community affairs program presented by the Anderson Center for Autism.
Welcome back to 1 in 36, the weekly talk show on topics related to autism spectrum disorder. I'm your host, Eliza Bozensky. I'm talking with Gary Shulman, who is the advisory commissioner for the Arlington Partnership for Children, Youth, and Families. You were just describing this, Gary. It sounds like an incredible organization, and it reminded me of a few things I just want to throw out there. So when I first started at Anderson 18 years ago, there was this program in New York State called Medicaid Service Coordination.
Oh, yeah.
And I was a service coordinator for early intervention well before I came to Anderson, right out of graduate school, in Brooklyn and Manhattan and the Bronx and basically all the boroughs. And I have to say, well, I'm one of those people who's just had a tremendous career that I value so much because I've gotten to do a ton of different things, all of which really have found ways to make me feel, good about what I'm doing every day. being an EI service coordinator in the boroughs, when you started talking about helping foster families, especially those who knowingly and happily foster children with special needs of various kinds. The foster families that I got to work with in that role were probably some of my favorite people I've ever met to this day, and so inspirational. There is a one woman that I will never forget. Her name was Rose White. She was a grandmother already. She had her own children. She had her own grandchildren. And I walked into her apartment near Yankee Stadium for the first time to meet her. And she greeted me with this warm smile that felt like a hug. And she had 5 little children who were all from the same birth mother. They were all born HIV positive. They were silent, except for the baby. There was a baby who was screaming because she was going through withdrawal, because she was born addicted to drugs. But it struck me, and they, obviously they were beautiful children, looked incredibly healthy, running around, playing, but silent. And they all had speech delays. And so we hooked them up with services, and they started seeing a speech pathologist. And the last visit I went to close out her case, when the kids were sort of all doing better, and, they were so chatty, and they were talking and playing, and Rose, I don't know where she got this energy from, but she was amazing. It was the closest thing to like an angel on earth that I could ever imagine. So I wanted to echo that, because whenever anyone brings up foster families, I
love them. I absolutely love them. I'm glad you brought up early intervention. That before I left New York City, I wrote the online resource manual for parents involved in early intervention. I was contracted with the Department of Health and Mental Health, and I also trained all new EI service coordinators.
Well, I may have met you, Gary.
You look very familiar to me. It's funny because I've done so many workshops for EI service coordinators way back when. I also love them. And I always say to them, you're grabbing these families at the beginning of their journey. That is such an important thing. You could make or break their attitude, because right now some of them are feeling hopeless. They're feeling helpless. They need to be linked with, and I say, before you link them with anything, link them with a support group so that they know they're not alone. I know throw resources at them, but to me, there's nothing more valuable than a parent sitting down with another parent. Honey, I've been there. Trust me, an older child. I know what you're talking about. I've never walked a mile in your shoes. I can't say I know exactly how you're feeling, but I also have a child with autism. Sit down with me. I'll tell you who's the good, the bad, and the ugly in tomorrow. And let me take you by the hand. You want to cry? Let's cry together. You want to laugh? I'll laugh until there's no tomorrow. Yep. So, I'm glad you've had that experience.
It was probably, it really started me off on my career, and I've done a lot of different things over the years, but that was just recognizing what it takes for somebody to open the door and let a stranger into their living room to say, help me with my child. It was, I wish that for everybody who wants to go into any sort of human services profession, because it is so humbling, and also it teaches you the things that you can never learn in a classroom. Right. You can really just learn by sitting down with somebody on their couch and saying, okay, how can I help? And then going back and figuring that out. So I just wanted to mention that. I brought up Medicaid service coordination, which is slightly different, only because you talked about linkage and referral services. So through the partnership in Arlington, I was disheartened when MSC went away, because I thought it helped a lot of families. It was flawed, I get that. But whenever I hear that any other entity is picking up that gap of linking families to the services that exist, that's another one similar to what you just said about a support group. Even when the services do exist, there's a missing piece, which is the help that's necessary to motivate and really help that parent feel like they're not just walking off a cliff hoping that they fall into the right service. Yeah. They need help with that linkage. So I'm thrilled to hear that you're doing it.
But I am glad that New York still has, they changed the names. Now they care coordinators. We have care coordination organization. We have care coordinators. You need a human being that the parent feels comfortable with. Mm-hmm. Sometimes there are cultural differences, religious differences, all kinds of barriers. One thing that I always used to say to the EI service coordinators, I always used to ask them this question. I said, when you first get to a parent's house for the first time, you're going to do a site visit. What do you do to make them feel like you really want to be there? And they would think, what did I do? And one person raised their hand, because this is what I was thinking. I always asked the parent, should I take off my shoes? And I would say, why do you do that? Even if it is a hovel in a place that you're not feeling very comfortable going to, and you're looking in, there's no furniture. By saying, should I take off my shoes? You're saying, I respect your home.
Yeah.
You know, and there was one service when he said, I, regardless of where I go, I always say before I come in, should I take off my shoes?
Mm-hmm.
And that immediately creates, oh, this person respects me, respects my home. It doesn't just see it as a house, it's a home. Thank you very much. Sure. No, that's okay. Keep your shoes on. Come on in.
Yeah.
But, you know, there are ways. That's a whole workshop that I do. I do a workshop on communicating with kindness. And that's part of that workshop is how do you tell somebody that you're here to be kind to them? You're not a bureaucrat. You're not reporting them to anybody. You just want to help in a kind way. That is so important.
I think we see very much eye to eye on that. And I appreciate that you're out there still doing that. Where you talk about the trainings that you have available, where can people go to get more information about those trainings and about you?
You know what? They can absolutely email me. How do you like? I said I didn't want to be overwhelmed, but it's okay to overwhelm me because I'm never overwhelmed. If it's a matter of a professional, now here, I want to make something really clear because I don't like frustrating parents even more than they've been frustrated. Mm-hmm. That it works is organizations contract with me to provide these virtual workshops. So a parent email me and say, Gary, I want to register for your workshop. I don't generate these workshops myself. Like your organization can say, Gary, we'd like you to present a workshop on a certain day, and then parents can register through you.
I see.
And then we would Zoom it. But if anybody listening and happens to be part of an organization, a school, a parent group that wants to contract with me to do a training, they can email me at, it's very simple. It's my last name, which is Shulman, SHULMAN, .Gary@yahoo.com. And I will send you my whole roster of workshops. I have like 30 some odd workshops that I do. Great. I adapt them to professionals, to parents, to whatever disability they happen to, deal with, to the age group. Like if it's an EI program, I would just deal with EI, on that level. So I adapt it to whatever the need is. Yeah,
that's great. And when you send us the link, we'll put that in when we post the interview, so people who are listening can follow up and check that out. Good. And again, it's Shulman, SHULMAN .Gary at Yahoo.
That's it. And just if they're interested in the workshops, I will shoot the roster of workshops right back to them so they'll have it.
Yeah. And just an added note to any families listening, any parents listening, if you like the sound of this and you think that you and your other parents at maybe your child's school or program might benefit from this, you can also always go advocate with your school district or with your administrator or classroom teacher or whoever it might be to suggest that maybe they check out Gary's trainings as well. Sure. So that's a way that you can advocate even if you're not the one who can access the trainings directly.
Yeah, I always say to people, I have over 50 years of expertise and information and resources. A lot of it is in here. It's useless. When I leave this world, more years are behind me than are in front of me. That's just a mathematical reality. I'm 74. If I kick the bucket with all this information, I'm going to be very frustrated wherever I get to, because I want this information to be imparted
out there
to people that can continue using it. And that's what I'm doing all the time. And I need to do that. There's almost a desperation for me to do that.
Yeah.
There are treasures out there.
I can tell. I mean, it's clearly your passion. We're running low on time. We have about a minute left. I just wanted to point out that I read an article about another aspect of what you're doing in Arlington specifically, which it's a little different, but I think it's so cool that you moved to Arlington, kind of joined a Facebook group to get to know the area and ask questions about the best places to go get various services, things that you might need as just somebody coming into the area as a new neighbor. And now you have your own group that you run because people responded so much to just all the positive things that you were putting out there. And I noticed you said that you moved to Arlington in 2019. So you were there as sort of a newer member of the community right as COVID hit, correct?
Well, here's what happened. We moved from Brooklyn to Palm Springs, California first.
Oh, okay.
There for a couple of years. And this Brooklyn boy could not tolerate the earthquakes and 120 degrees. So then in 2022,
okay,
Arlington, where I started Arlington through the eyes of a newbie. It's completely positive. We celebrate the beauty. And I always tell parents of children with disabilities, think about what brings you joy.
Yeah.
Take time to remember what brings you joy and do that, because if you allow that back into your life, you will be able to interact more positively with your child. Go for a walk. Notice a flower, pet a dog, something that used to bring. I watch cartoons every Saturday morning because I remember as a child, I loved watching my Bugs Bunny. I make a point of watching Bugs Bunny Saturday morning. It brings me joy. So if it makes you laugh, it brings you joy, you do it. So I celebrate positivity here in Arlington and all over, and I try to do that with the parents.
I love it. I love it. I was ready for positivity, and you brought me some today, Gary. It's been a pleasure talking with you. Remember, you can reach Gary at shulman.gary@yahoo.com. And really, best of luck in all you're doing. And thank you for what you've already done and what you continue to do in helping families and individuals. This is 1 in 36, the weekly talk show on topics related to autism spectrum disorder. I'm your host, Eliza Bozensky. And remember, Anderson cares.
You've been listening to 1 in 36, a weekly presentation from Anderson Center for Autism, celebrating their centennial in 2024. Join them for another edition of the show next weekend.